Good evening and welcome to the second Inside Government show for the spring 2018 semester here at CU Community College and broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. Our next guest is no stranger to this studio. He is New York State Deputy Majority Leader John DeFrancisco, who represents parts of the city of Auburn and CU County in the state legislature, something that he's done since 2013. And he's been here every semester, it seems, since then, and we're delighted to have him back. By the way, you might have also read that he's running for governor. When he was last year, he hadn't declared, but he has now. So over the next half hour, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in Albany, specifically the budget the governor presented, but also the senator's campaign, as well as some other things that are going on in the state. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
So you must be exhausted. Where are you going now? I don't want to get into the campaign stuff, but I'm assuming usually we can't get you in early February because the legislature, and this just happens to be a break time, but I'm assuming you're going county to county right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting process. In order to get the nomination, you have to get enough delegates at the convention to vote for you, and so that means you're traveling the state from Buffalo down to the end of Long Island, and I've done it, and I keep doing it, and I now know why they call it Long Island. Driving from one side of Long Island to the other end is a long way. So it's been a lot of travel, meeting some great people, meeting some people that have pledged their support, and we're just trying to generate enough support for the Republican and conservative nominations.
So have you hit 62 counties yet?
No, I have not. I probably hit about 45, okay. Some many times, because there's a lot of activity going on, especially in the larger counties. And that's part of
because there are regional meetings.
There's regional meetings of the GOP county committees. One was in the Finger Lakes, one's a southern tier. The next one to come up is going to be in Orange County, and then the North Country. Those are the type of things we're doing.
Okay, and it's always nice to see New York State in the snow.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
We'll come back to all of that. I do want to talk to you a little bit about the state budget. The legislature, first of all, where is the legislature in the process of the budget? The governor presented a budget about 4 weeks ago. Right,
and then the next step is always the budget hearings, where the chairman of finance, which I used to be, as well as the chairman of Ways and Means Committee in the Assembly, have hearings, and anybody who wants to talk about the budget, there's witnesses from the administration.
Pro and con.
Mostly people looking for more money. That's usually what they're looking for. Yeah, it's shocking. It really is.
Please cut me.
Nobody has ever asked for a cut that I recall. Those hearings, a couple had to be canceled because of some snow problems, and now the last couple will come up the end of February.
And do you take part in those?
I don't. I used to take part in every hour, 13 hearings, at least 11 hours a hearing. Now I go when there's something of interest that I have some questions about. But once the hearings are done, then the Senate will put together a one-house budget, what they believe the budget should look like. Assembly will do the same. Then the negotiations to a final budget, hopefully by April 1.
So what do you like about the governor's spending plan right now?
Well, not much. I think that we are losing population. The Empire State is losing more people than it's gaining. That means people are voting with their feet. It's not affordable in New York State anymore. Today, as I was coming over, I was reading a clip where we are now the #1 highest tax state in the country. So you can't afford to be here, so people leave. And we have a deficit of $4.4 billion. And rather than what families do when they don't have enough income to get by, they cut. They just don't do things that they otherwise wanted to do. The governor's proposal includes $1 billion in revenue enhancers. If you don't have a glossary of Andrew Cuomo terms, that means taxes and fees. And that's the exact opposite way to go. We've got to tighten our belt in order to become more efficient.
So let's take them piece by piece. Let's talk about the 4.4. Does everybody agree that there's a 4.4 billion deficit?
Everybody agrees that at least a $4.4 billion deficit. There are others who think it's as high as $6 or $7 billion. but that's a minimum of the problem. And it all depends upon tax revenues coming in. And Tom DiNapoli each month will give an update.
State comptroller.
Yes, the state comptroller. I saw him in New York City at an Association of Towns meeting, and he gave an update of what the income was like, but it's still a $4.4 billion deficit.
So with that, I think I listened to both E.J. McMahon from the Manhattan Institute, I think the Citizens Budget Commission, which are not necessarily aligned all the time. I thought they used the word, I thought I heard the word structural. So their comment is that this deficit at 4.4 is just the beginning. Well, it only gets worse.
Well, I'm not so sure I agree with that, but the deficit is around that amount. But and the reason is that when you do a budget, it's not only what your spending is going to be for this year. There's a projection of other spending. When tax cuts come into effect, there's a middle-class tax cut over several years, and those are going to kick in each year. So then you're in a different situation. You're starting at a lower amount of revenue if you're giving more tax breaks. And but the fact of the matter is there is a deficit, and you got to deal with it, either by cutting spending, which I believe in, or well, there's only two areas that you really got to look at. The two biggest areas that's virtually all of the budget is health care and education. And as far as health care is concerned, Medicaid, 1/3 of the people in the state of New York on Medicaid. Now that's remarkable. This is supposed to be for the poor and the infirm. And there's more people eligible in New York State because our rules are a lot easier to become eligible. The second part, so you got to look at the eligibility standards. Then you got to look at optional services. The federal government says you have to do X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C, but you don't have to do other things. And what those optional services are, you can take them or leave them. Well, New York State takes them all. And we have the Cadillac of services. The Medicaid is much better than a lot of health care policies that individuals have to pay for. So I'd love to provide everything for everybody. But as a practical matter, nobody can do that, including family members. So you've got to be able to get an up and down review of that, eligibility standards, and optional services, and decide what you want to keep. The other one is education.
So let's deal with Medicaid for a second. Do you think there's the political will to literally go through that menu and start chopping programs off?
No, in any budget cycle, there's really not, because
so how do you accomplish that?
Well, the budget cycle, it's trying to get all the legislators on both sides of the aisle in agreement on major structural changes. It doesn't happen, and that's one of the main reasons I'm running for governor. You only can change something fundamental in a state if you have a new leader in the state to make those fundamental changes, because 90% of what's in the original budget becomes a part of the final budget. So you've got to have somebody that's willing, from an administrative standpoint, to do those tough things and present a budget that's actually starting to cut costs and provide necessary services, but provide only what you can afford. And that's why I'm running. What really triggered me, I've been thinking about this, I've been going around the state trying to decide it, when the governor gave out his budget presentation where he's talking about $1 billion more taxes, and it just exacerbates the outward flow of people from the state. Just a matter of time before somebody's going to be the last one out and turns the lights off. And you can't provide services for those who truly need them if you don't have a tax base that's going to pay it. And that's why it's getting really scary at this point.
So that's one piece is Medicaid. I interrupted you on education. No,
that's fine. But the education is the other major issue. And every year there's more money for education. I voted for those things. However, now we're at that critical stage. There's got to be fundamental change. And what you gotta unshackle the teachers in the classroom. That's where teaching's done. You have to have a teacher. Well, when I went to school with a book, and a chalkboard. Now it's smart boards. But the fact of the matter is, that's where the teaching is done. We've got to just chop as many regulations as we could possibly chop. Teachers don't need to fill out needless forms so someone can file them in Albany and make some philosophical discussion about some social issue. we got to teach kids. So first step is to eliminate the Board of Regents. My view of the Board of Regents, it's just a political body that makes regulations. It always asks for more money every year. And
this year not being any different.
No, $2 billion, and we're in a deficit situation. You don't need more regulations. You need to chop them. You get rid of the Board of Regents. Very few states have it. It's a vestige of probably the 1800s. But that you don't stop there. You got to look at that same scrutiny, give the same scrutiny to the education department, and look at what promotes education and what promotes jobs for people in the education department that aren't directly dealing with students.
So while the budget is one piece of what is being talked about, a lot of oxygen has been taken on the budget front has been about this issue of tax policy, and a lot of it deals with the SALT, the state and local deduction. And it seems to be that's where a lot of people are concentrating time on. And this is, when you were on last time, you said, listen, if they want to get rid of SALT, if they do it on a gradual basis where states can plan, that makes sense, you get it. They did not do it. So how do you deal with the loss of deductibility for state and local taxes?
Well, first of all, this has become the political tool that the governor is trying to use in order to promote himself among the potential candidates for president. The whole speech, the budget speech, not the whole, but the big majority is about how the federal government has sent missiles to the state of New York because this tax code is going to kill everybody. Well, the numbers really are showing that there may be problems for about 15% of the people. Most people.
I mean, national polling's not showing that right now. That it's a problem.
That it's a problem.
Nationally, it sounds like most people support it.
That's the point. But even in New York State, if you look at the numbers, some people believe that about at most 15% of the people may have less deductions. Now, so 85% people are getting benefits from this tax relief program. So the ones that aren't are the ones that mostly the higher income people that cannot possibly deduct all of these dollars, only $10,000 for deductibility of taxes. So what is the reason why it's hurting New York and California? Because we have the highest taxes. When you have the highest taxes and there's a limit on deductions, so how do you deal with that? And I'll tell you the way the governor claims to deal with it. But the way you deal with it, if your taxes are too high, you don't blame the government for the federal government for not giving you more deductions because you're taking too much money from the people. You go on that same concept that you got to be acting more efficiently. I tried to get, as you mentioned, the federal government, the legislators, the congressmen and women to phase it in over a few years so that the state has the incentive to start cutting taxes. It didn't work. So what has the governor proposed? The governor proposed, for example, school taxes for each school district, over 220 school districts, to create a charitable trust. So taxpayers, instead of paying taxes to the school district, they make a donation to the charitable trust so that they get a charitable deduction. Now, you don't have to be a genius in federal tax policy to recognize that that is a scam, and people aren't going to give a voluntary charitable deduction. They're giving the amount of the taxes that it would have been. So those are going to be discontinued. He literally has proposed that. Now, that's a gimmick, and the gimmick isn't going to work.
There's also planned to have employers be able to take care of deductions for their employees, and they can write it off, and that's only for a limited group. Am I correct?
That's correct, and it sets up a bureaucracy that is.
I was going to ask you on that, on just the idea of just the deductibility for school districts and setting up 220 not-for-profits. What's the cost of that?
It's 2,000. Oh,
2,000. I'm sorry.
2,200 school districts.
Okay.
Well, that's my point. You're setting them up bureaucracy. So say they set the bureaucracy up, and the school districts do it. If they don't think the people who are going to deduct those charitable deductions in quotes aren't going to be audited and have to.
And the IRS may change the rules.
They don't have to change the rules. The rules right now don't allow people to pay claim that they're charity, they're really paying their taxes.
So as far as you're concerned, what the governor's proposing isn't even necessary.
It's not only necessary, it's destructive. You're creating, he demanded that the towns and villages consolidate, and he demanded that they meet in order to cut back on cost of government. He's creating bureaucracies for something that is not going to work. And he just changed it. This is the last part of it. Just changed it. He said no school district's going to have to do it. It's a voluntary system. Look at the pressure there's going to be on school districts.
Right.
And, I mean, please.
So would your feeling be that your conference would not have this as part of its either one House bill or in the final package?
Well, it won't be part of the one House bill. I can guarantee you that. I have been predicting for years what our House will be willing to do and not do, and I'm surprised many times. I can tell you that I won't support anything like that, and that's, again, one of the reasons I'm running. You got to be able to do things much more efficiently, and you need leadership from the top.
So the plan right now is to adopt the budget by March 29th because of some religious holidays, and Easter's on April 1st, and that says it all in itself. But you still think the budget will be adopted by March 29th?
I think it will. I think it will. And it will as long as the governor modifies his plan, because I can't imagine that the Senate as a group is going to put up with some of these proposals. And one of the proposals, one of the taxes, is a tax on hedge funds. Okay, now hedge fund companies, they have computers. They could go to another state. They could go some other locations. Not like they have buildings that they have to stay in, or manufacturing plants. It's sort of like, and the financial industry is our biggest contributor to taxes. It's sort of like a proposal that maybe by California taxing Silicon Valley, giving a 20% surcharge on Silicon Valley. It's asking them to leave. Right. So many of these things, it's almost as if he wants us to say no because they're so ridiculous.
So I want to ask you a technical question, somewhat, if you can give us a simple answer on this, is we've heard a couple of different things. Is spending within the 2% tax cap that he's proposed?
Absolutely not.
I asked that because I misspoke about the Citizens Budget Commission. I think it was not on the issue that I mentioned before, but this was that really it's up 4%. I think they're suggesting that it's up 4%. Local governments have to keep to 2%. Do you think spending is up at that level of 4%?
Definitely, and it's not me making the calculation. The Democrat comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, that's his estimate. I think that's probably where the Citizens Commission got it. And I believe him because, you know, how many times have you heard of an economic development project? And that's another story that we probably need a separate half hour for. But
we're going to try to get to it, but I'm not sure we will. But
well, I'll be quick on this one. But the fact of the matter is, many projects that are supposed to get so many dollars for the project, usually you wait 6 months, 8 months. It's almost like postponing into another year. And when you keep doing that, it's really spending more money because you're obligating yourself for future years.
So closer to home, because they will be sitting here next week, Jeff Perazzola, Superintendent of Auburn, who you've been working with, and Lisa Green, their budget manager. They're looking at a multi-million-dollar deficit this year. Even if they go into their fund balance, which I guess is their plan, they're still massively short. Mm-hmm. What do you tell districts like Auburn when it comes to school funding? Because theirs is a different issue. It's a foundation aid issue. But it's still with a big fix issue.
And there you go with you can't fix it in a budget cycle. You can't. It's a political document that you need votes to change. And those who lose under the new political document end up not wanting to vote for it. And those who win, okay. That's another fundamental change. Both myself, when has sponsored a bill by Mid-State School Consortium that provides for a much simpler approach and a one-pager that you could check whether you're getting a fair share of the school tax, school revenue, rather than some convoluted formula. The formula is much easier, and I support it. And then when the Democrats for a short time took over the Senate, Dave Valesky was the sponsor of the bill. And we can't get it passed. You need leadership from the top to have a fair, transparent formula so that there's not so many addendums to it, you can't figure out why one district gets one thing and the other gets another.
So usually you get your one House bills, there's this mad rush in between to negotiate, so you get an April 1st deadline. Whether it's the big issue of education, structuring, or Medicaid, are these things that the legislature, and it most likely does have to include the governor and his staff, do you have to go back into special sessions in August or September, October, where they're not part of the budget, but to prepare for the next budget?
Not really. It has never happened since I've
been
there.
No, I'm saying, do you need to get to that point where you're not dealing with it in the context of the current budget where you're under the gun for April 1st?
There's a better approach, and hopefully this can happen if we have a new leadership, and that is we have a 2-year legislative cycle. Some states, the legislature's in only for a month or two. There's no reason that if we plan properly that we can't have a 2-year budget cycle. And obviously, if there's a problem in the second year that you have to deal with something to correct something, fine, but at least give some kind of planning ability to school districts or to healthcare hospitals or agencies. To me, that is the way to go to give some type of predictability to people who want to plan. Rather than coming back and make corrections after the first year and so forth, but have a 2-year plan, and if you need to correct something sometime in the second year because the revenues aren't coming in or there's a windfall, that's the way it should run, and that's what I would propose. So
did the budget tip you over? Is that what made you make the decision? I offered you time back in November to make your announcement here.
That was really it. The fact that, many people that are going to watch the show have children and grandchildren and brothers and sisters that have moved out, and that rate is accelerating. And when you see the current governor making a budget that actually makes it worse and promotes more movement out of the state, that you can't wait. And I just that was what really.
So budget seems number one. Is there a number 2 and number 3 issue for you?
Well, number 2 and number 3 is you got to have a leader that someone has some kind of confidence in. You don't have somebody that has been, not only me, but many others have called him a bully, an individual. The corruption trial is showing a lot of stuff as to how the government really works and the pay-to-play schemes. And he's vindictive. If you don't support him on something, he's going to make sure you know that that you shouldn't do it again, young man.
Well, on that particular front, you've gotten your share of knocks in the last 2 or 3 weeks since you've announced.
Yep.
One of those issues was that some Democrats have complained that you shouldn't be part of the budget negotiations. That because you're a candidate for governor, if there are any talks between the Senate and the other bodies, you shouldn't be part of them.
I'm elected as a senator till the end of the year. That's quite an asinine statement, but I don't.
It's not from me, but
no,
but you have heard it.
I have heard it, but it's so illogical. It's absurd. There's people running for different things all the time, and I'm one vote. If I can influence people to vote my way, that's great. If I can't, if I'm doing something that's wrong, the majority won't agree with me.
So I'll come back to the second item in just a second. Were you surprised at the number of colleagues who may not have necessarily supported you for majority leader immediately endorsed you for governor?
No, I wasn't surprised at that at all, because we have a great working relationship in the conference, and I think that I believe that I have people respect me for saying what's on my mind and doing what I think is right, and that's what I think they like the most about me. Sometimes I'm too outspoken and too direct, but on the other hand, people like that. You've never
been accused of being shy and retiring.
No.
Brian Kolb, who was on here a couple weeks before you were, or vice versa, he dropped out of the race a couple of weeks ago. Have you talked to him at all?
You know, I haven't. I have not talked to him, but he indicated because of family reasons, he just didn't think it was the right thing for him to do, and I respect that. And when he got out, I was able to, since we're in a very similar region, we're very close to each other, we were able to get some other endorsements that were holding the line for for Brian in view of his involvement with the Assembly for so many years. So,
do you hope to get his endorsement along the way?
I hope so. Right now, you know, it's not up to me to try to talk to him about his reasons, nor to push him any way to endorse anybody. When he thinks he's got a candidate, I'm sure he'll endorse somebody.
You expect others to get in the race at this point? It's you and Joel Giambra, but he's a former county executive, but he was a Democrat up until recently.
No, he was a Democrat first, then became a Republican,
okay.
Became county executive, and actually he's been a lobbyist with the El D'Amato lobbyist firm, and he's.
But do you see clear sailing for you as on the Republican and
no, I don't see clear sailing. But you know, in order to win as a Republican, you got to have the conservative endorsement with the lopsidedness.
And they didn't even invite him to their
No,
event.
they're not. They don't like some of his policies and so forth, and so it's not clear sailing because there's always that talk. Someone mysteriously is going to be out there, and one of them that's the most amusing to me is Betsy McCoy, former lieutenant governor.
I do remember her quite often.
But she, it's amusing only because she lives in Connecticut. But so it's pretty tough to be governor of the state.
Well, she was a former lieutenant governor under the first Pataki administration. Do you have a pick for a lieutenant governor?
I'm not presumptuous enough.
So you'll leave it up to the...
Yeah, I've got to. No, I won't leave it up. It'll be a joint decision between the party and myself. But on the other, if I get the nomination, but I don't have the nomination yet. To bandy about names for lieutenant governor, I think would be irresponsible.
The governor has roughly $30 million in dollars for his campaign in the last reporting. How do you think you could become competitive, other than free media?
Well, free media has been great so far. I've been putting out releases and getting interviews all over the state, and it's been very good. And I think people are saying that this guy makes sense, it's common sense, and hopefully that will start a momentum so that when it's time to really raise some money, there'll be two people in the race if I'm in it, and we're going to get money. Secondly, the 30 million is a negative too. When you see the pay-to-play operations, you know, the people really want the person who operates government that way to remain in the government.
If for some reason you don't get the gubernatorial nomination, will you seek re-election to the Senate?
No. This is my choice. I'm going to run for governor if I get the nomination. If the party doesn't want me, well, I'm not going to go back and run again for Senate.
So what is the process to find a replacement for you, at least in your party?
It's really the party makes a determination based upon the vote of the various committee people and in my district, and they will make that decision. And once we see who the candidates are, I
don't think anybody's declared at this stage.
No, nobody's declared. It's too early, but I think that I will support somebody, I'm sure, depending upon who comes out.
So you don't have a favorite at this particular stage?
No, it's got to be a committee person process, and they've got to make the choice.
I want to ask you two quick questions, and we finish off. And one is your Senate colleague, Senator Pat Gallivan, who has supported you, endorsed you, has suggested that more funding be given to schools for school resource officers. He's saying take it out of the current allocation the governor's suggested, especially in light of Parkland, but he had suggested this before after the SAFE Act was approved.
Right.
Do you think that's a good idea?
Absolutely. I mean, how could you leave students totally unprotected when there's crazy people in the world?
Should teachers be allowed to carry guns in classrooms?
That would have to be looked at more very closely. You have to have people that have had experience with guns, that know how to use them and know how to use them with discretion. Not all teachers or not all legislators have that ability, and I think you'd have to have people that had law enforcement experience available in the classrooms or in the schools.
When the Percoco trial is all said and done, what do you think the impact will be on the governor's race? This is the corruption trial. There's core executives and others.
Well, I don't know.
I know you've been slapped around a little bit by the governor's people saying that you've taken economic development funds in 2010, et cetera. But what do you think the end result, separate from that, is that will come from this trial?
But on the economic development funds, you can't just throw that out. I got to respond to that.
Okay.
Because there was a program for the empire zones that was under the Pataki administration. I was with a large law firm at that time. And when I decided to go into private practice with a couple of people, I was informed that this applies. So I applied. This is across the board. Anybody that's eligible could have applied. The problem with the governor's economic development is he decides who gets the tens of millions of dollars.
So his is picking favorites, yours is a general program.
General fund. That's across the board tax cuts is what I'm for.
Back to the Percoco. What do you think we'll find out in the end?
Well, we've already found out a lot. I don't know if they're going to be found guilty or not because you got a main witness that's not too credible and got arrested for lying
in the middle of the trial.
During the trial. So I don't, whether there's guilt or innocence.
Didn't think you could make this stuff up, did you?
No. It'll be part of my next book. But the whole point of it is that we've learned a lot already how state of New York operates. Howe was a close ally, Percoco was his brother, and how things work in government. And that in and of itself has raised some eyebrows, and I think people want to change. And this is not the person that's going to make the change, meaning the governor. He's going to do the same MO. He'll have the same MO.
30 minutes goes really fast. I did have one viewer question. They're going to kill me in the control. What part of Italy are you from? I was asked this by a viewer email. Near your family.
Near Campobasso, and we went to Italy in October. My wife's village is 10 miles from my village. Now,
and where is that in the relation to the leg in the boot?
It's well above the boot, but in southern Italy.
Okay.
And we had a great time. I got some great stories the next time you want to talk about it.
We'll have you back on. We'd love to have you back on. We open this up to you all the time. We'll even open this up to the governor if he wants to come in and
I'm sure he'll be here.
So we do want to thank Senator John DeFrancisco for joining us to give us an Albany update. We would love to have you back in the spring once we get closer to the budget process because that's important to this area in this district. We'll be back on Tuesday with an update on foundation aid, which we just mentioned, with Auburn Superintendent of Schools Jeff Perazzola and Business Manager Lisa Green. We'll also be following that with a kickoff of our Beyond the Front Page series. Next week on Tuesday, it will be Cuyahoga County Habitat for Humanity and board members Tim Carr, Kip Corper, I hope I'm saying it right, and Tessa Cornell to give us an update on what Habitat for Humanity is doing. And then next Thursday we'll have County Administrator J.J. Woods will be on Inside Government for his first appearance since he was hired back in December for the county, and then we'll finish off with a Beyond the Front Page on the Cayuga Fund with board members Andrew Fish and Michael O'Gorman as that group celebrates its 10th anniversary. Over the next several weeks we will have Cayuga County Legislative Chairman Patrick Mahunik as well as Wasco Town Supervisor Ed Wagner, Cayuga County Planning Director Steve Lynch, and City Manager Jeff Dygort, as well as Stephanie DeVito of the BID for Downtown Auburn, as well as representatives of Hospice of the Finger Lakes. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know you can send us your ideas and thoughts for guests or questions. You can send them to cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government or Beyond the Front Page, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. We hope you have a great rest of the week. We want to thank you for watching. Have a good night and have a great tomorrow.